What's going on, everybody? Welcome back on into the Space Cowboy Show. I'm your host, Ricardo, and I think it's time that we did a retrospective of where we're at currently with the Micah Parsons trade. The trade is still not yet completed, obviously, with the draft capital that the Cowboys have acquired from that trade, but there have been moves that have been made since I last did a video talking about the trade to really get an idea of where we're at currently, if the Cowboys have made the right move, who's winning the trade, is it a win-win? We'll talk about all that in today's video, but before we do that, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button. It's free and easy to do. Subscribe if you're new, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future content that comes out on this channel. Also, the show is powered by Creshman Media, so please be sure to go check out the other shows on the Creshman Media Network. Now, going back to August of 2025, when the trade initially happened, the Dallas Cowboys traded Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers in exchange for defensive tackle Kenny Clark and 2 first-round selections in 2026 and 2027. There were many Cowboys fans that were irritated at this move, those that tried to compare it to the Luka Doncic trade that had happened. And then not only that, there were those like myself where we were looking at this move and saying, why didn't you do this earlier when you could have gotten more draft capital most likely, and now you're late to the party trying to make up for something that you should have done earlier. Now that we've gone through the whole 2025 season, many Cowboys fans also look at the fact that, hey, you traded away your best defensive player and look what happened. Even though I don't believe that Micah Parsons would have changed the thing in relation to the results of what happened with this team. Maybe he would have impacted a couple games here and there, but I don't think that it would have resulted in the Cowboys doing anything special in 2025. But what made things interesting about this were the moves that the Cowboys made after the fact, and that was making a move at the trade deadline to acquire Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets. The Dallas Cowboys made a trade where they sent a 2026 second-round selection, a 2027 first-round selection. Either one of those picks that you have in 2027, whatever one is higher, will go to New York, and Mozzie Smith in exchange for Williams. Because when you look at it for what it is currently with the moves that the Cowboys have made, you, in essence, traded Micah Parsons for Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, and a 2026 first-round selection. Now, initially, the Cowboys were just going to trade Micah Parsons to the Jets in exchange for Quinnen Williams and a first-round pick in 2026, but luckily, things panned out to where you basically not only got Quinnen Williams, but you got that first-round pick and an additional player who is very good at the position, even at his age. And you look at where you're at, and the Cowboys have 2 studs in their defensive tackle room and a first-round pick to play with in 2026. And when you look at it, the trade is pretty much complete once 2026 is over, because once you get to 2027, one of the first-round selections, whether it be Green Bay's or Dallas's, is going to go to the Jets. So basically, whatever happens with that 20th overall pick will complete the Micah Parsons trade. But looking at it from the Cowboys' perspective, I think they did a pretty good job, all things considered. I'm glad they just didn't sit and let things play out with the draft capital that they had. They went out and got aggressive, and they added talent to the defense and one of the best defensive tackles in football. Now what you can do is you can go into that 2026 draft and hope to maybe add another defensive player or do whatever you wish with that particular selection, whether you want to trade down, gather more draft capital, or if you want to trade that for an already established player, you have that ability to do that. But the other part of it is the Green Bay Packers, right? I know we don't talk about the Packers on this channel because we talk about the Dallas Cowboys here. But from their perspective, this is a move that you make because you feel like you're very, very close to winning a championship. And when you look at what Micah Parsons was doing in Green Bay, he was having a very good year for them, but unfortunately, he did tear his ACL, and you don't want to see that. And you saw what happened towards the tail end of the year, and I don't even think it's more so that the Green Bay defense was the problem. I think the problem was that the Green Bay offense was so inconsistent, and you saw it at times where even in that wild card game against the Bears when they choked that massive lead, it really did look like, hey, the Green Bay Packers, so long as their offense can be consistent, I think their defense can hold up their end of the bargain because they have a really good defensive unit, especially with a guy like Micah Parsons and even Rashawn Gary on that line. And I think that the other part of it too is that with the Packers making this trade, the shift now becomes, in order for you to win this trade, you need to go out and win a Super Bowl. I don't think you can look at this trade and say, okay, it's a win-win for both sides, because for the Packers, they need to prove that they made the right move by winning a championship. And I'm not trying to compare it to the Herschel Walker trade because that was a completely different set of circumstances and different set of guidelines for that particular trade. But when you make these win now moves, you need to go out and win a championship, right? That is the goal when you're making these moves. So a good example I like to point out, granted it's a different position, is the Matt Stafford trade with the Detroit Lions. When they traded Jared Goff, they swapped quarterbacks, and they gave up 2 first-round selections to go get Matthew Stafford, right? The Rams doing this signal that this is a win-now move. If we change quarterbacks, we will be in a position where we will win a championship, and we have to do it immediately, which is exactly what they did. Matt Stafford being under center for the first season there in LA, went out and won a championship with the Rams. Granted, they made some other moves, but the primary thing is you made a win-now move, and it paid off. There are other instances where win-now moves don't pay off, but my main thing is that for the Cowboys, what exactly are you coming out of this trade with? You're coming out with Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, and whoever that 20th overall pick is, or whatever more draft capital you get from that 20th overall pick, that will end up completing the trade for you. And I think that in a vacuum, that looks very good. But the other thing about it, too, is that the Dallas Cowboys need to do things with those particular picks. Just because you got a first-round selection doesn't inherently mean that you're going to win this trade and that player is going to be just as good as Micah Parsons, right? And that is exactly where I look at a guy like Jimmy Johnson, where he points out, yes, you have the draft picks, you have the ammunition, but it's about what you do with the draft picks that will make the trade. That's why a trade like the Herschel Walker trade worked out, because it wasn't that they had that many picks. Yes, when you have that many picks, there is a bound success rate that will come up. But my thing is that when you look at what happened, you made quality selections with those draft picks. Meanwhile, when we look at how the Cowboys have handled their first-round selections of late, they haven't been the greatest. Yes, you had Tyler Booker, which was a home run. I mean, that's pretty hard to miss on a player like that. But you have guys like Mozzie Smith, for example. You had guys in the first round like Taco Charlton, right? And you can talk about how they missed on defensive players unless they were like at the top part of the draft. So where I look at where the Cowboys are at, but I do think that as long as the Cowboys nail that 20th overall selection, and even if they're a solid player, I think you come out of this as a winner. Because when you make a move like this, to me, it signals that you're trying to retain other talent that's on your roster. And on top of that, you need to go out and do that. Hey, we saved all this money not paying Micah Parsons. Guess what? We're going to go pay George Pickens. We're going to go pay Javonte Williams. We're going to go re-sign these guys to lower their cap hits. That is what the Cowboys need to do. Again, I have no problem if you want to move off of a guy. But the one thing that you need to do is be proactive and make moves to show why you moved off of that guy. And again, you can't just do it out of spite. You have to do it like you're operating an actual football operation. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about, and I got to give a shout out to Cowboys Beat because this is something that we've talked about as well, is the Cowboys moving off of Micah Parsons definitely feels uncharacteristic for a franchise like the Cowboys. As Chris pointed out, he did mention that Micah Parsons very much so resembles what the Cowboys are over the last 30 years, and I can definitely see that, right? I'm a Penn State guy through and through. I defend my Penn State guys so long as they don't do anything crazy, but my thing is that when we look at how Micah Parsons operated even afterwards of leaving the Cowboys, even I was like, all right, I don't know about this, man. This is a bit too much for me. I think for me, the one thing that really told me I'm okay with moving off of Micah Parsons and I'm glad he's no longer on my team was what happened at Media Day during the Super Bowl when he had the conversation with Myles Garrett about, would you trade your Defensive Player of the Year awards for a Super Bowl? And Myles Garrett was like, yeah, for a chance at a Super Bowl, yeah, I would get rid of that. And it really felt like, all right, bro, are you really trying to be a good football player or are you trying to be a celebrity? And that's something that rubs me the wrong way because as you can tell, the way that Micah Parsons interacted in the locker room with the Cowboys, and from what I have heard, rubbed many people the wrong way. Now, the big thing is that, okay, now that he's gone, what has happened since then? You had a guy like Trevon Diggs. He's no longer there, and where did he go? He went to Green Bay after he was released by the Dallas Cowboys. Not like that did anything else, but my thing is that it's clear that when we talk about the culture here in Dallas, right, that is a big word that's used. so many times. But when we talk about it, people throw that term out and don't really expound upon what that means. So when I talk about the culture of the Dallas Cowboys, and if you followed me for a long time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very much so a country club identity where it's all about the glitz and the glamour and not about the results on the football field. There are plenty of teams that resemble this identity. And I think that for the Cowboys, that has been their main thing ever since the last Super Bowl that they've had in 1995-96. And that's where I look at everything and I say, okay, if you really want to see the Cowboys win a championship, Jerry Jones needs to step out of the way and let the football people make the football moves. I know that is such a generic position to take, but we have seen how the Cowboys have operated when they get the wrong coach down. I've talked about it before. A guy like Jason Garrett wasn't going to take you to the promised land. A guy like Mike McCarthy, yes, he raised the floor and gave you multiple postseason appearances in a row, but he wasn't going to get you over the hump. And even a guy like Wade Phillips, as much as I like Wade Phillips as a defensive coordinator and things like that, he wasn't the guy to get you over the top. Do I think Brian Schottenheimer will be the guy to do that? I honestly don't know, but the way he talks, the way he has built his staff, shows me that he is serious about the opportunity that he was given, and he wants to make the most of it. And it is up to the Joneses, again, specifically Jerry, because he is the general manager, to let Brian Schottenheimer cook. Let him make what he needs to do and just stay out of the way. And it looks like that's exactly what he's doing. Now, it all depends on the results as we continue to see Brian Schottenheimer develop this program, but it really looks like he's trying to establish an identity of no nonsense and trying to get the Cowboys to where they haven't been in a long, long time. And stuff like that takes time. With Mike McCarthy, he didn't have success initially. He went 6-10 his first year, and that was a complete mess of a first season, right? You guys remember that? And then you talk about Jason Garrett's first full year, if you remember that. That wasn't very peachy keen either, okay? Because I don't have a problem with the Cowboys not being good in the first year of a new head coach. That's just the norm here in Dallas typically, right? But it's about what you do after the fact that will say the most. And I have talked about it. I do think we need to wait to see what happens in year 2 and year 3 to really make the most of what we have here, because with where you're at right now, you still have a lot of work to do. And while Brian Schottenheimer's done a great job putting together the staff, the personnel needs work specifically on the defensive side of the ball, and the offense needs some tweaks as well. But I do think that the Dallas Cowboys are moving in the right direction so far, as long as they continue to make the proper moves. But at the end of the day, guys, I do think that if we look at where the Cowboys are at the end of this Micah Parsons trade, I still think that the Cowboys came out as a winner in this because of the fact that you got 2 really good defensive tackles and a first-round pick to play with in 2026. Meanwhile, for the Packers, you're out 2 first-round picks, sure, and you didn't make the playoffs, which is cool and all. But again, you need to go on a deep playoff run. And I understand that injuries happen, and I do feel bad for what happened with Micah Parsons, because I really wanted to see what this Green Bay team could do with a guy like Micah Parsons in the postseason to see, okay, was he that missing piece? But because your offense is inconsistent and you lose a guy like Micah Parsons and injuries just continue to stack, there's only so much that you can do. So we'll see what happens next year, and it would be interesting if we get a Packers-Cowboys playoff game. That would be very crazy to say the least, especially with what happened in the regular season that year. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope to see you guys in the next one, but have a good one. Goodbye.